Hi everyone, I'm Jamie, also known as the Somewhat Cyclops, and I wanted to go over some information that I received from the state of Oregon following a public records request to look at all of the Aspergillus failure rates across the state for the time that the rule was in place. The state of Oregon, this is a really hot topic, so they did not send me exactly the data request that I wanted, but I wanted to go over the analyses that I produced with the data that I had received. I had shared some draft versions of this analysis with a few people. If you're one of those people, you'll notice that the numbers have slightly changed, and that's because when I originally got this data set, somebody was kind enough to send me image files, and I basically went through brute force, just typed them all in and made a few mistakes. So luckily this data set from the state of Oregon has helped me be much more exact. So let's get to it. The first tab that you'll see in my analysis, see there are all these tabs up at top, is the count of tests. And what's interesting about this is the data file was organized by license. The license name was redacted, so I have no idea who these licensees were that sent in these tests. But it did tell me the number of tests, the number of failures, and the percentage failure rate. And from that, I derived a couple more pieces of information, and we'll go through that. But just initially, I wanted to take a look at what was the frequency of the number of tests done per license, and you can see that 66 licensees sent in one test, and 101 licensees sent in 141. I talked to an anonymous source at one of the laboratories, and they told me that what was happening was in a lot of cases, farms would send in one test, see how that came back, and then would make pretty big decisions based on that. Those pretty big decisions were often the heartbreaking decision to have to close down because of the concern that they were going to test for positive for Aspergillus on any of the tests that they sent in. So I just wanted to go over that this was what that histogram looked like for that count of tests. But I sort of like pie, and so I put it into a pie chart, and you can see that it gets a little bit chaotic because there are a lot of counts in there. You know, while 1 is the most frequent, and 141 and 94 and 89, those numbers didn't happen as frequently. And as you drag your mouse across, you can see that you'll get a little highlighted box. Now, I did do a couple of annotated call-outs of numbers that I thought were pretty interesting, so you can interact with that. The other thing that I would like for you to notice over here is if you highlight one of these, it will highlight that on there for you. You can also, I believe, highlight several groups. So Tableau is a very interactive tool, a very powerful tool, and I just wanted to go over some of that power with you. You'll see it show off in a second here. So here's where I put together a grouper where I group together, 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20. These groups will become very important in later analyses. But you can see that about 49.64% of the tests, the licensees sent in 1 to 5 tests for testing. For 100 plus, only 0.73% were over 100 tests. So you can get a really good idea of just how many tests were coming through the state of Oregon. So then I also wanted to have an understanding of just how many of those tests were pass-fail. You can see that 10.18% of those tests were fail, 89.82% of those tests were passing. The other thing that I added in here is that number of tests of the micro-fail tests, that's this number over here. You can select or deselect a number. So if you aren't as interested in people who sent in 1 to 5 tests, you can deselect them. Or say you're not interested in anyone who sent in over 100 tests, you can also deselect those over here. And you can see that the pie chart actually adjusts as I make those adjustments. Neat. So then I really wanted to understand the fail rate frequency. So fail rate would be by licensee, what was their overall percentage of failures. And you can see that this is all grouped in like this. So for the most part, for 256 out of the 411 licensees that were included in the file that I received, they received a micro fail rate of 0.00, meaning that they didn't fail at all for microbiology test results. I believe that it was Aspergillus, but like I said, I'm unsure because of the way that the state labeled the information. But just looking here, 256 of them had no failures versus, one had a fail rate of 57%. The next most common was 100%. 19 licensees had 100% of their tests failed. Now, I've added these groupers over here, so if you didn't want to see the number of tests failed for people who had 1 to 5 tests or 101 plus tests, when I go over there and I untick them, you can see that the pie chart adjusts to that number. I also added an additional grouper down here if you wanted to just exclude people who only had 1 test, and then, any other number of tests that you didn't want to see fill in this pie chart. That's over there. Neat. So then I wanted to look at the fail rate frequency histogram. I think histograms are pretty cool. They help show a picture. And again, I did some grouping. So I grouped 1 to 10% fail rate, 10 to 19%, 20 to 29%, etc. You can see them down here in the columns. You can also see that the number of tests is represented by color. If you wanted to disinclude the number of tests 1 through 5, you could do that by using this grouper here. You can see that everything adjusts. Or if you just wanted to disinclude people who had 1 test or the other outlier, which was 141 tests, you can also choose to do that. And to adjust things back, tick on all. All right. So the next thing I wanted to understand was farms that had failures, meaning if a farm had any failure at all, I counted them as a farm with a failure. And if a farm didn't have any failure at all, I counted them as not having a failure. And so you can see yes and no. So 62.29% of farms that were tested did not have a failure for microbiological results versus 37.71% who did. Then I wanted to take a look at what that percentage of fail rate looked like when I looked at just the farms with failures. So you can see here that I've included the number of tests, so you can, look at people who had more than 1 test, etc. And again, you can see that these fail rates are adjustable. So all of that can adjust based on any numbers you really want to examine. I will go back and add on this graph the same capability. The other thing that you can do is see this card down here if you didn't want to see anyone who had a fail rate percentage of, say, 100%. If you wanted to disinclude that, you can exclude them from the data set and everything else would adjust and tell you what those percentages are. So, again, Tableau is pretty neat to play with. So, again, looking at a histogram, farms with a failure or had a microbiological failure, what were those percentage rates looking like? Then I also have added in test groupers, so if you didn't want to see anybody who had 1 to 5 tests, you can see that the graph changes pretty dramatically for the fail rate. But you can always go in and dig in. You can see here, 90, this fail rate percentage, there was 1 licensee who sent in 90 tests, and their fail rate was somewhere between 10 and 19%. Then I wanted to understand farms who didn't have a failure. What did they look like, and what did they look like per number of tests? So again, you have these cards where you can keep or exclude those tests. But you can see that 21% of them had 1 test, 10.94% of them had 2 tests, and these are the farms with 100% pass rate. You'll notice also, if I go down here, that the person with, the licensee with 141 tests had no failures, which is interesting. So then we get into the no-fail test number group pie, because again, I like pie and I like grouping things. So you can see that 60.16% of the people who had no failures, the licensees who had no failures, had 1 to 5 tests that were run. So then I wanted to look at the same sort of thing with a farms with the failure rate percentage group bar. Again, you can select things by the number of test groupers. So if you didn't want to see people who had 1 to 5, you can just include them, or you can put them back in. And if you wanted to highlight, notice if I select one of these color keys here, it'll highlight that section of the graph for me and give you some interesting percentages to look at. And then I just threw a couple more pieces of information out there. I did sort of a heat map of what the failure rates looked like. And then I also put out a data table of the number of tests and the micro fail rate, just because it's interesting. You can also download this. I decided that since this was a completely public data set that was sent to me, you can actually download the data if you want to. You can download an image, crosstab, PDF, PowerPoint, whatever you would like, or even a Tableau workbook if you are a Tableau geek. So there you go. I hope that this information is helpful. I had been seeing a lot of weird numbers around this, and I felt compelled to sit down and put together this little video just to go over some information that I had received directly from the state, and to go over the way that I approach the analysis and how I use Tableau. I hope that this helps, and I hope that you have a great day. Thanks.